How often do you think about real miracles in your life? Well, for the nation of Israel, they had experienced incredible miracles the last 4 months that they were back in Egypt 40 years before. They experienced those huge miracles of the 10 plagues that came upon Egypt. Then they experienced that huge miracle of the parting of the Red Sea. And then there were the daily miracles for 40 years that they didn't even think about miracles. Probably became mundane to them, about the water flowing out of that rock that Moses struck there at Rephidim that brought water every day for them with no source, no spring or anything like that to feed it. Then there's the other miracle of the manna that fed them every day for 40 years. Real miracles. That's what these are, real miracles. Well, in this lesson, we will see another real miracle in the lives of the people of Israel, that nation of Israel. Some of those people who were 20 years of age and younger when they came out of Egypt, they're going to be seeing this miracle that's going to happen today, would happen in this lesson today with Joshua for a miracle like this for the second time. For those who were born over in the wilderness, this kind of miracle they're about to see is probably just about their first time. It's one of those wonderful things. In either case, it's a wonderful miracle that only the Lord God could do. So, in Joshua chapters 1 and chapter 2, we discovered the great beginning of Joshua's command. Let's put it that way, the great beginning of Joshua's command. And now we come to the largest section of the book. It's going to last for 21 chapters. And we're going to call this the great campaign of Joshua's command. And it starts today. It begins here in chapter 3, verse 1. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and he and all the sons of Israel set out from Shittim and came to the Jordan, and they lodged there before they crossed. As we mentioned in the last lesson, the last chapter, chapter 2, the Lord spoke to Joshua at the turn of the day of Nisan the 7th and told him to arise and cross the Jordan. Joshua immediately sent 2 spies to Jericho that night. Now I've got kind of a timeline here. This is the month of Nisan. Here's the 7th of the month. And this is the day that the Lord told Joshua, arise. And so Joshua sends spies to Jericho that night. Well, the next morning, it's still Nisan the 7th, okay? Because remember, the night starts before. And Joshua gives the instructions to move down to the bank of the camp, to leave Shittim and go down to the bank of the camp and park themselves there so they'll get ready. And so they've got to pack up their bags, and they've got to move about 5 miles from Shittim down to the Jordan River, and there they're going to wait for the return of the spies. And however, the Lord had already told Joshua, and Joshua had already told the people that all this was going to happen in about a 3-day period after the 7th. The 7th day is going to happen. 1, 2, 3, we're going to leave. So on the 3rd day, after moving the camp to the bank of the Jordan, Joshua gave the instruction to cross to the officers, and they shared it with the people over in verse 2. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the midst of the camp and commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God with the Levitical priests carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after that. Now I want you to look at that picture I have there behind the scripture. You'll see that ark there in all its glory. It's all the acacia wood covered with gold and the 2 cherubs on the top. That is the picture that I have seen almost all my life of the priest carrying the ark, wide open without any shelter, any covering whatsoever. I want you to remember that till when we get down into the lesson a little further. In chapter 4, verse 19, we learn that the crossing occurred on the 10th of Nisan, 3 days after the nation moved to the bank of the Jordan River after the 7th. So on the 7th, he got the instruction. They moved to the Jordan River. They're going to wait 3 days. 1, 2, 3. That's when they're going to move. So that big day has arrived. And for the nation of Israel, it was a dream come true. 40 years after leaving Egypt, they're finally going to go where they had long to go 40 years before. Now, had they been in a stationary camp, or at least a semi-permanent campsite, the 10th of Nisan would have been a very special day, because in the Levitical law and the Deuteronomy law, it's the day for selecting the lamb for the Passover. Well, here on the 10th, they have to select an unblemished lamb for the Passover. And had it been a regular year, they'd been selecting that lamb, and then it would be slain on the 14th and roasted and eaten that night. And then the next day, the Pharaoh would say, "Get out of here," and they'd be leaving Egypt if it had been a regular year. But this is not a regular year. Here's what happens. The nation of Israel was departing from the Jordan River that day. Well, back in Moses' day, back when they did the Passover, at 6 p.m. it turned into the 15th of the day. You know, I've talked about the day starts on the 5th at 6 p.m. And so on the 15th p.m. it's going to be the Passover, going to be the passing of the death angel coming through for the Passover. And on that day, they're going to get the orders to leave. And then just about 30 minutes before leaving Egypt, they're going to leave, and the sun's going to be going down, and they're going to actually walk through the night under the full moon of the 16th of Nisan. So they leave at the end of the day. We know this because back in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 6, the Lord and Moses, or Moses through the Lord, from the Lord, changes the day of the celebration of the Passover meal to the day they left Egypt. And here's what it says. Deuteronomy 16:6 says, "You shall sacrifice the Passover in the evening at sunset, at the time that you came out of Egypt." You notice that picture I have there, it's nighttime. They're leaving at sunset. There you have the moon shining. It's a perfect example. So instead of eating it on the evening of the 14th, they're going to eat it on the evening of the 15th from now on. So they're selecting the lamb on the 10th is what they are doing. And so they had to walk, back in Egypt, they had to walk through the night of the 16th under that light of that full moon. So I want you to consider another interesting detail. The nation of Egypt left there on the 15th of Nisan. We know it. There's 30 minutes left in the day, but they left on the 15th. According to Exodus 12, verses 40 through 41, Exodus 12, 40 through 41 says, "Now the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. Now catch the next line, it's very important. "At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the host of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt." In other words, here's the translation. Jacob and his 66 descendants that were still living with him over in the Canaanite land, when those 66 descendants joined him and moved to be where Joseph and his 2 sons were, and his family making 70, they moved into Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. And they left Egypt 430 years later on the 15th of Nisan. You see this 15th of Nisan, these are very important dates to the Israelites. And think of this, on the day the camp moved across the Jordan River, it is the day of selecting that lamb that they're going to have to protect for the next 4 more days until it's time to slay it and cook it for the Passover meal. It was going to be a full day. So this instruction is not given on the crossing day. It is given the day before, on the 9th of Nisan, and we see that shortly. So the instruction says to follow, get this, follow the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God with the Levitical priests carrying. Now I want you to look at that picture. You see that picture? That ark is covered, and that is very important. You might think that those people would have seen the ark in all its glory, like that first picture I showed you, carried by the priest, but that's not the way it was, because the Lord had given specific instructions over in the book of Numbers of how that ark was to be carried and how that ark was to be transported and how that ark was to be cared for. It says in Numbers chapter 4, verse verses 5 and 6. When the camp set out, Aaron and his sons shall go in, and they shall take down the veil of the screen and cover the ark of the testimony, that's the covenant, with it. And they shall lay a covering of porpoise skins on it, and they shall spread over it a cloth of pure blue, and shall insert its poles. So when the ark is going to be carried by the priests go over and take everything down. The people are going to see this box-shaped ark, but they're going to see a blue cloth covering it. Underneath the cloth is a porpoise skin. That's for waterproofing. And underneath the porpoise skin is that heavy, big veil that separated the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant from the other area where the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense was inside the holy place. So the ark is supposed to be carried this way and never any other way. When it's out among the people, it's always supposed to be carried. But when the people say the ark was carried by the priest, they could not follow too close. So we come to the space for the crossing, and that is in verse number 4. However, there shall be between you and it a distance of about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Now I want to tell you, 2,000 cubits is not a short distance. It's 2,900 feet thereabout, or a little more than a half a mile. And so this ark, these priests are supposed to be a little more than a half a mile in front of them. Because remember, this is a huge nation. 603,000 men able to fight, not counting the women and the children. And so this ark needs to be way out there, so it's going to point the way, and it's always going to be the point of reference for the direction of which the nation of the people should move. When they see it being carried, lifted high, they're going to follow that. Well, we have it. We come to the time to cross over, and it will occur on the following day, and the following day is going to be the 10th of Nisan. But we hear about the following day here in verse 5. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among the people. It was the 9th of Nisan, and Joshua instructed the people to consecrate yourselves. Now back in Exodus chapter 19, in preparation for hearing the Lord speak to the nation after they'd just gotten to Mount Sinai, and the Lord's going to speak, and they're all going to hear, thou shalt not have no other gods before me, blah, 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 the 10 commandments to the people. Moses instructed them to consecrate themselves, and it involved washing their finest clothes and putting those finest clothes on to come to meet the Lord at the foot of the mountain. There is no reason why this would not be the same case here with Joshua. Joshua was there 40 years before. What better way to enter the promised land than in your finest clean clothes? What better way is there to go worship your Lord than in your finest clean clothes? No matter what those clothes are, you put on your finest, whatever your best is, make sure they're clean, and come to worship the Lord. Well, the next day, Joshua gave the order to cross over, and that comes in verse 6. And Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the Ark of the Covenant and cross over ahead of the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and they went ahead of the people. Here Joshua has called for all the people to line up with the priest out front. Now you know I'm talking about that. Remember back in elementary school, we'd line up in the hallway, everybody line up to go in, to go out to play and recess, and we'd line up out front to go back inside. That's not what we're talking about here, because that would be almost impossible for everybody to line up, because we've got 12 tribal nations, thousands and thousands of people. So under normal marching orders, with this Ark of the Covenant down at the edge, what would have happened was it'd be Judah would follow as they crossed, and then would come Issachar, and then would come Zebulun. And actually the Ark is out of order. It's supposed to be way back at the back under normal conditions. But here we see the normal conditions have been changed for the moving across the Jordan River this very first time. What has changed is that 3 different tribes are going to move across. and be in front. But we're going to deal with that when we get that. So put that on hold. You have to come back and listen again to catch that instruction. So the Lord gave Moses on that very day, at that very moment, another instruction for the priest, for the priest to cross over. And here we go in verse number 7. Now the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. You shall moreover command the priests who are carrying the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Well, when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, the Lord led them to the bank of the Red Sea. There was only one pass that could go through the mountains, that could get them all the way to that sandy beach area where they were. And when they got there, they were up against the sea. And the only way to get out of there was to turn right back around and go through the same pass back through the mountains. But the problem was, Pharaoh's men were there on their way in. And so the Lord moved himself in the cloud, pillar of a cloud, column of a cloud, and he stood between the Egyptians and the Israelites. And the Israelites were trapped against the sea. And the people grumbled. And then Moses said to them something very uplifting. He says, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent." Exodus chapter 14, verses 13 and 14. It's pretty much an impressive speech is what it is. And as you know, the next thing that happens in the parting of the Red Sea is they're going to be crossing on dry ground. I don't think 40 years later these people with Joshua are expecting to see anything like that or have any experience like that. At that water's edge, these priests were to stand. And the people were about to see the work of the Lord with Joshua in the same way they saw the work of the Lord with Moses. Well, finally, we come to the message to cross over. Joshua speaks of what Israel will know after the crossing. It's not what they know now, it's what they're going to know when they get on the other side in verse 10. Then Joshua said to the sons of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will assuredly dispossess from before you the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Gershonite, the Amorite, and the Jebusite." Joshua is quoting the words of the Lord. Evidently, the Lord had just spoken these words to Joshua. And once across the Jordan River, the Israelites are going to see the Lord show his power and his presence to all of them. And they're going to know that he's the Lord and he's doing the fighting. So Joshua then speaks about what Israel will see. It's going to be what they will know, and now we come to what Israel will see. Verse 11. "Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over ahead of you into the Jordan River." Or we can pretty much bank it that they're stepping their feet towards it. The people of Israel will see the ark carried into the Jordan River by the priest. I cannot imagine that the people expect the miracle that is about to occur with this crossing. Well, Joshua states to Israel right off the bat what Israel will do. It's what Israel will know, what Israel will see, and now what Israel will do here in verse number 12. "Now then, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one man for each tribe." Now, before the crossing starts, those 12 tribes must select a man from each tribe to do an extremely important task. The interesting thing is Joshua doesn't tell us what that task is going to be. So just at random, they're going to select a man. Now, I know what that task is going to be, and they better select a really healthy man. But they don't know yet, so they're going to select a man. Well, from what Israel will know, to what they will see, to what they will do, we come to what Israel will experience here in verse number 13. It shall come about, when the soles of the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, and the waters which are flowing down from above will stand in one heap. For the first time, after 40 years, Israel is about to see and experience the same thing again. The parting of the waters so the nation can cross on dry ground. Joshua states the start of the miracle. He says it's going to start when the soles of the priest's feet will touch the water. The water will stand in one heap. Now, under that, we're going to kind of divide it into two things. We come to into the parting of the Jordan River. And Joshua explains the parting of the Jordan River in a little more detail here in verse number 14. Listen to this carefully. So when the people set out from their tents to cross the Jordan with the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap a great distance away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those which were flowing down towards the Sea of Aqaba, the Salt Sea, were completely cut off, so the people crossed opposite Jericho. Okay, picture this. Here's where we are. The waters are going to stop flowing up in a place 30 miles to the north of where the camp is, a place called Adam. Adam is on the east side of the Jordan River, the side they're on. Zarethan is on the west side of the Jordan River, right across. But that's 30 miles north. And it just so happens that up there where Adam is, on that side of the Jordan River, there is a natural valley and a natural plain that exists there where the waters can be diverted and stored, much more water than would be coming down in the time it took them to cross the river, until the Israelites were across. However, we have to ask a question. Who diverted the water? That's who with a capital W. We know who diverted it. The question is how did who divert it? How did he stop those waters? Something happened up there that stopped those waters and pushed them over into that area called Adam. Well, from an archaeological investigation, the answer is we don't know what happened. We don't know how the Lord diverted the water, but from a spiritual position, we know who diverted the water into the valley, into the plain. It was the Lord God of Israel, and He did it. Now, once the water stopped, another miracle occurred when we see the priest standing in the Jordan River in verse 17. And the priest who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan. Remember, they've got to keep their space. So they see this is all dry ground, all the way from 30 miles north, all the way down to the Dead Sea. It's all dry ground, and they're going to keep their space and go around the Ark of the Covenant that the priests are holding. They're on dry ground. There they are. The priests are there. They're walking on that dry ground. How could this dry ground happen so fast? We have to ask the same question back with Moses at the crossing of the Red Sea. It was all by the might and the power and the will of the Lord God Almighty. He blew the wind, He stopped, He diverted the water, He dried the ground so that it was time to go across. All they had to do was faithfully, in their nice, finest, their best clean clothes that they had, pick up everything, even care for the little lamb that they're going to have to care for and protect that lamb as they go across the Jordan River. All they have to do is just nice and carefully and slowly march around those priests who are standing in the middle of the dry Jordan River. Now, the story of crossing the Jordan River is not over yet. There is still much to be said, but that will have to come the next time we come together to study and begin that study in Joshua chapter 4. I hope you will join us at that point in time. It's so important. Joshua is being elevated to the same status as Moses, and it's occurring on this day, the 10th of Nisan, when the nation of Israel crosses over the Jordan River. It's a good study. It's a good thing to know that we also can trust the Lord in the same way. If we'll just put our eyes on Him, and it doesn't matter whether it's the 10th of Nisan or any other day, if we'll just stay true to Him. Will you stay true to Him and trust Him?